Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on my PSA Rock 5.7 in this video. Last video I walked through the complete disassembly of the lower frame and all of the components, except for one part which I could not get out in this block here, that pin, because my punch decided it no longer wanted to punch anymore and caved. So I did go ahead and got a new punch. This is a 1/16 off the top of my head. Yes. So I'm going to get back to work and see if I can get that pin out to remove the last little part that I need to remove, which is this little safety pivot here, which based on what I'm noticing on all the parts in this gun, this is the one that is the tightest fit and is probably causing the most resistance of any of the parts as far as the trigger pull goes. So that being said, I'm going to grab my hammer block and see if I can knock this pin out. And success. You can see the pin there. With that pin, you will get the ejector that holds that ejector in, as well as the safety piece, and this is the orientation that both those parts go in. The ejector just slides into that little slot there, right there from the top, and then the safety piece will just drop right in, and then the pin goes through. I will say that once the pin was released from the ejector, this moved very freely. So it's almost like the pin might have a slight bend to it or something along those lines. I know that kind of sounds weird, but maybe, with how hard that was pressed in there, it did have something that was causing it to bind here in this area in its groove. I'm not sure. It's something I'm going to investigate a little bit and try and figure out, because like I said, that kind of had some tension on it to get it to spin upward into its position. So every time you pull the trigger and where it would push back on the trigger bar, that would be resistance felt on the trigger. So something I want to look into, because like I said, so far that seems to be the biggest point of resistance I have found in any of this mechanism. So a little bit of testing done, and yep, that answers the question. If I just run the punch through here and only the safety, it moves very freely, just rotating on the punch without issue. It's hard to do one-handed, but I was able to move it up and down, no problem. There you go, no resistance whatsoever. It moves really easy. As soon as I go to put the pin through, if I put the pin through, just the pin works fine, but the pin isn't seating in anything. As soon as I put the ejector in right there and then put the pin into the ejector, then it's all game over. It's a tight fit into the ejector, and it does not want to pivot anymore. So I have a feeling the ejector is ever so offset the way it's sitting in that groove, and that's moving the pin and causing bind on the safety piece right here. So I'm going to think about how I want to resolve the issue, but that seems to be what the problem is and where I'm feeling the most drag. All right, so I've been messing with this, and I'm starting to think that it is actually engineered to have the ejector hole be a little offset to retain this pin and not let it go past, and actually keep this pin kind of cocked at an angle. Here's the reason I'm thinking that. If you look down in this groove here, this is where that safety goes. Right now I have the pin all the way out to this side, which that's how it, or not how it was. It came in from this side and was flush on this side before. You can see there's barely any of it that goes into this groove, so there would barely be any engagement to that safety plunger or safety pivot if this thing was free floating. So it looks to me like that is supposed to be in bind, so I don't think I'm going to be able to do much to clean up the movement on the safety pivot here. So what I'm going to do is start polishing everything like I've done on previous firearms, clean it up as much as I can, and then reassemble it, and we'll see what we end up with. All right, I went through and did everything I'm going to do as far as the rear assembly goes. So I started off, I went ahead and I did polish just ever so slightly the top and side of the rail guides that you can see here. And all that's really doing is just cleaning out the finishes on it, because if you feel it, the finish is a slightly rough texture, so that just smooths it out ever so slightly. That was all I did on that. And then I did go all completely over the ejector, polish it up, completely over this little safety pivot, clean it up, and again, you're really just removing or cleaning up the finish that's on it, because the finish is rough. And then last was the sear. I went completely over that. So you're doing all surfaces, sides and top, bottom, all the way around anywhere that anything is going to touch and possibly cause friction. You know, with this pivots, this is what pushes up on your firing pin safety that's in the slide, and then this is where the trigger bar hits it. So you know, you want to do all along those edges as well. This I just did really just to make it look a little nicer. And then last, this pivot that is what actually lowers the sear when the gun is fired. The firing pin hits this. This is plastic, it seems, but I still went over it just ever so slightly just to, you know, smooth it out a little bit. But pretty sure this is plastic, at least that's what it feels like and that's what it looks like. So don't do too much to it because you may damage it. So that is everything as far as the back block goes. Next are going to be the items for the trigger block. All right, 2 more things I did real quick before I move on. I did also polish in this area here where the safety pivots up against this block. You can see it's a little shinier there. So I did that as well. And then as far as the little safety mechanism goes, I took the 1/16 punch and I put it in the hole for this, and I kind of pushed on it as hard as I could just to kind of maybe chamfer / open up the edges of the hole, because it seems like, you know, it might have been a little sharp, and I wonder if that's what was binding on the pin previously. I mean, I know the pin is going to be at a slight angle based on how it has to go into the ejector, but I'm wondering if that'll help with the pivoting of this part. So just real quick, now I am done with these parts. It'll be on to these parts. All right, so as far as the trigger goes, on this portion, it's really only these 2 parts I'm going to do anything with. Obviously the trigger and bar. I am going to polish the whole bar assembly where it's exposed, because this could ride up against the inside wall of the frame, so might as well clean that up on the outside. It's a little like tacky feeling just because of the coating that's on it. So I'll get that polished, as well as this area here, because this is what, you know, is going to be pushing on the safety mechanism as well as the pivot to drop the sear. So I'm going to go over all this, both sides probably of the arm and on the back, get that all polished up. And then as far as the top of the trigger, you know, this is just a plastic trigger, so nothing crazy there. I'll probably do a little light polishing on each side of this because you can see it's got a slight texture to it. Nothing too crazy. And then I'm going to get a small polish wheel and go inside of here, because this is where the trigger sits in, and, you know, just to clean up the walls a little bit on each side, because the trigger does pivot against those. So those are the items that should clean up the trigger feel. That's really about it as far as this block and the trigger goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to work on doing some polishing. And real quick, here is the trigger. You can see the bar is all nice and shiny, polished up. And then, like I said, I did do a little bit of just polishing. You see it's shinier on each side of the trigger up here where it pivots inside the housing. So yeah, last thing I need to do is grab the housing with a smaller polish wheel and go ahead and get that knocked out, and then this should be done. All right, so here we go. Here is the block, and you can see I also did go over the rail what the slide will slide on, clean those up on the sides and the top where I could get to them. But then I did also clean out in here where the trigger sits, and now with the trigger, I mean, it goes in and out, no problem. There's like no friction whatsoever, slides in and out nice and easy. Just remember, when you're doing the plastic portion of the trigger, go at a very low speed so you don't burn the plastic. But yeah, it should be good to go. It feels like there's minimal friction there, and I'm pretty happy with how that is gonna work out. So that is it as far as the polishing goes. Correction, I did decide to do one more little bit of polishing, and it's right here on the edge of the rear block, because this is where the trigger bar may touch this ever so slightly in operation. So I did just go ahead and polish on that side as well. So now everything is polished. So that being said, that is where I'm going to end this video. Next video, I will come back and get this all put back together, and then we will have the lower frame assembly of the Rock 5.7 reassembled, hopefully functioning properly, and ready to then move on to the slides. So if you want to follow along, if you like what you're seeing, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I do review them and I will reply. I do have a second channel related to automotive stuff. If that's something that interests you, please check it out. There is a link in the description of this video. I do have a Rumble channel as well, and there is a link to that in the description of this video as well. And that being said, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.